So now, let's think about the graph of y equals x squared, which is going to be a parabola. So we got our parabola. The line y or x equals 2, so we have 2 here. Now, when x equals 2, y is equal to 2 squared, which is equal to 4. So if we went down to here, we know that's a 4. And it says, and the x-axis, so we're bound here. So this kind of sort of rectangularly shaped thing is our shape that we're dealing with. But we're rotating it about the y-axis. So what we have to do now is kind of look at it like this. Since we're rotating it around the y-axis, we want to draw our rectangle, the representative rectangle, perpendicular to the axis of rotation. So here's the rectangle. Now, is there space between the axis and the actual shape? Yes. So we need to use pi times the integral from a to b, big R squared minus little r squared dy in this case. Now the biggest thing with this is, since we're dealing with y's now, and that's the biggest case, we know y is equal to the square, or y is equal to x squared. So if I take the square root of both sides, x is equal to the square root of y. Or actually, it's equal to the positive negative square root of y. But which one am I going to use, the positive square root of y or the negative square root of y? The positive, because we're in the first quadrant. So this is the guy that I'm going to use for this. X is equal to the square root of y. So that part, I mean, the parabola goes down here, but that would be the negative square root of y. I know here x is equal to 2. So we're going to do the only difference usually is that you have to transform an equation that was y equals x squared into x equals something with y. That's usually the biggest difference. Otherwise, it's exactly 100% the same. We got to figure out big R, and we have to figure out little r. So we have to figure out both of those. Now, big R is going to go from here to the top line. How many spaces does it go up? 2. So we just count up the x-axis. So big R is equal to 2. So big R squared is equal to how much? 4. Now little r is going to go right up to the actual graph. So little r is going to be the square root of y. And so r squared is going to be y. Now, like I said, this is kind of doing the same thing as what we would do if we were going around the x-axis. That's the square root of y, that's 2. And that's a 0, that's a 0. So we can figure out the lengths of big R and little r. So now I have, if I take r squared minus little r squared, that's 4 minus y. So my volume is going to be pi times the integral. Now on the y-axis, what's the smallest bound we're looking at? 0. What's the biggest one? 4. So we're going from 0 to 4. So if we were rotating around the x-axis, we'd be going from 0 to 2. But now we're going from 0 to 4. We're going to get 4 minus y dy. So my volume is pi times the quantity of 4y minus y squared over 2 from 0 to 4. The 0 is nice because you plug it in, it's all gone. So this is going to be pi times 16 minus 16 over 2. And like I said, if you plugged in 0, because we have to subtract off the 0 part, but there's nothing there because you have a 0 there and a 0 there. You get pi times 16 minus 8, which is 8 pi. No. Does that make sense? I think the biggest thing when you're going about the y-axis instead of the x-axis is this part right here. Taking y equals x squared and changing that into x equal to square root of y. And then everything is kind of, normally we go 0 to 4, but we're going 0 to 4 in that way. That's fine. Not a big deal. It's still a representative rectangle. You're going to add up all your rectangles, so we have to integrate it. We're still doing everything we got to do. In this case, yes. Well, if you're rotating around like this, if you're rotating around a horizontal line like this, you're going to get everything in terms of x. So even if you're not on the x-axis and you're like y equals 1, you're still, everything's in terms of x. If you're rotating around this, you're in terms of y.
So it's always going to be y, y, x, x, and not y, x?
Yes. Yeah, it's always going to be one variable. Looking at your test, everything's, that was really nice to you, and everything is about, well, no. Two of them are about the y-axis. Nope, that's x-axis, rotate. There's one about the y-axis. Or not the y-axis, but x equals -1. So that just means you take this, you move it over the -1, and that becomes just becomes a different situation for you. But it's the same thing like this.